Ladies and gentlemen, our Lieutenant Governor, Peter Kennedy.
Thank you, Charles. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. What an honor it is to be in this room back with you all back home. Last weekend I was doing 3 Lincoln Days in 3 nights, but none of them are like Cape County Lincoln Day for me. Lisa, thank you for all your work here tonight. Charlie, thanks for that gracious introduction. I'm honored to be with 2 great Republican leaders for our state and our nation tonight who are with us, our former state chairman, state chairwoman, and co-chair of the Republican National Committee, Ann Wagner, who's here. Ann, stand up. And my partner back between 01 and 05, the first Republican Speaker of the Missouri House in over 50 years, Catherine Hanaway, who's here tonight. Thank you for being here, Catherine. We meet tonight at a time of great Republican resurgence across America and also here in Missouri. We made historic gains, as you know, in the Missouri General Assembly, elected a new state auditor, a new United States Senator, and quite a ways west of here in the west central part of the state, stretching all the way to the Kansas City suburbs. We retired a 34-year Democratic member of Congress and replaced him with Vicki Hartzler, and we're very proud of her. But this victory was not confined just to Missouri. Republicans now hold governorships in 29 states, and with historic gains way down the ballot in state legislative races, we picked up on average over 13 seats in every single state legislature in America, almost 700 seats nationwide. And that's what really tells you where the future of this country is, where the farm team is, where the talent is being developed. It's higher than either party has achieved in the modern history of our country. But these were more than one-time victories, because winning is not the goal, winning is the means to our very important long-term quest to redefine the role of government and to put our states and our nation back on the path toward fiscal sanity and the principles of our founders. It is not enough to win an election, because as you've heard from these folks, we must govern responsibly. That's our charge, and tonight I'm happy to share with you that conservatives are leading the way. Faster than anyone in Washington, these leaders, emerging leaders at the state level, have recognized that mounting debt and unfunded liabilities pose a real threat to our future, the future of our children and grandchildren yet unborn. In Indiana, Governor Mitch Daniels has cut spending, cut taxes, and cut government. In New Jersey, a Democrat-run state for who knows how long, Governor Chris Christie has stared down tax and spend Democrats in the legislature. He's slashed state funding, reformed the pensions of state employees, capped property taxes, and in the process, he's become something of a YouTube sensation, and he's just getting started. And in Wisconsin, in the great Badger state of Wisconsin, have you noticed? A star is born. Governor Scott Walker is bringing his state back from the precipice of fiscal ruin by offering firm, principled leadership. Facing imminent defeat, Wisconsin's Senate Democrats stamped themselves as the cowardly cut-and-run caucus. They have abandoned the very duties they swore an oath to faithfully carry out, and they made a mockery of our form of government. I can tell you, ladies and gentlemen, some of you remember I served 8 years in the minority in the Missouri Senate. And during those 8 years, I lost many battles on the floor of the Senate. It would never have occurred to me to quit my duties and flee to another state. I would rather die than flee to Kansas, I'll tell you. And leaders such as Governors Christie, Daniels, and Walker, and newcomers such as Nikki Haley and Susana Martinez in New Mexico and Brian Sandoval in Nevada are on the vanguard of this re-energized conservative movement. that attempts to have, imagine this, attempts to have an adult conversation with Americans about the real problems facing our country. But President Obama and his left-wing allies have made it abundantly clear they will not be part of this conversation. They've made it clear they will continue their reckless spending spree despite criticism even from within their own party and within their own left-wing media allies. As we saw Evan Thomas of what used to be a great magazine called Newsweek say, and by the way, 2 years ago he was comparing this president to some sort of a god, his word. He said that this budget submitted last month is a betrayal. And that's why it's critical that we all win at the national and state level, so we can curb the power of the federal government and bring conservative reforms back to places like Indiana, Wisconsin, New Jersey, New Mexico, and yes, back to Missouri. You see, I believe Missourians are ready for this re-energized conservative movement, ready for an adult conversation, and ready to side with Republicans in this battle. Now, last year, I was privileged not to be on the ballot, although the way the year ended up, I kind of wish I might have been on the ballot. But since I wasn't on the ballot, I ended up doing over 50 events for other candidates in every corner of our state. And Catherine knows what I'm talking about. When you do that many events, you find what works when you speak to an audience and when you listen to people. And I found myself resorting to words from a speech that have already been commended to us tonight, words spoken by a man who stood in front of an audience in October 1964 and who said to that audience that the issue in this election, he said almost 46 and a half years ago, is whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a tiny intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives better than we can plan them for ourselves. The man who spoke those words was derided as a washed-up B movie actor named Ronald Reagan. He spoke those words in a losing effort in 1964. 16 years later, he would lead us to the magnificent victory of 1980 that presaged so many more victories to come. But this Ronald Reagan believed so many things that are great about our country, and I'm going to return to him at the conclusion of my remarks. But you know, those words from 1964 really have passed the test of time and frame the issues that are before us today. The crowd in Washington that had unchecked power for 24 months, led by President Obama, Nancy Pelosi, and Harry Reid, they're quite certain they know better how to plan our lives for us than we do ourselves. Look at energy policy, where their plan is to double our energy prices. How that helps anybody but be a jobs program for India, China, Malaysia, and Mexico, I don't know. But that was their plan. And the massive takeover of our healthcare system, a stimulus plan, spending $800 billion with nothing to show for it. We were promised an unemployment rate that would not go above 8%. It's at 9% now and has been close to 10% for most of the last 2 years. Anywhere you look at it, their plans have failed. But looking to next year, my fellow Republicans, one thing is clear. We need to finish the job. We need one more election next year like the one we just had. And we can finish the job next year by sending Barack Obama back to Chicago to be Rahm Emanuel's constituent. We can finish the job by making Obama Claire McCaskill a one-term senator. And the job won't be finished unless we make Governor Nixon a one-term governor. From my vantage point in state government, I've had a front row seat to Governor Nixon's tenure as chief executive over the past 2 years. And I'm sorry to say I've witnessed his lack of leadership during that entire time. I'm reminded of the enduring quote from a great Republican president, our 26th president, Teddy Roosevelt, who said, it is not the critic who counts, the credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who errs and falls short again and again, who spends himself in a worthy cause, who at best knows the triumph of high achievement, and who at worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who know neither victory nor defeat. But Governor Nixon is not our man in the arena. Instead, he has chosen to be a spectator. Governor Nixon was a spectator as Missouri lost 87,000 jobs in his first 24 months as governor. He was a spectator when our state lagged behind the nation in job growth. He was a spectator when Democrats in Washington, having unchecked power for the first 2 years, passed devastating bill after devastating bill that has saddled our state and our country with job killers and mandates. But there is one arena that Governor Nixon loves to visit, and that is the Mizzou arena. Now, I happen to have that in common with him, and a few weeks back was there cheering on the Tigers against Texas Tech. But you see, for him, it is about the perks of the job. He loves the photo ops, the prime seats at sporting events, and especially the taxpayer-funded airplane, as you may have read. We recently learned that Governor Nixon has racked up more than $400,000 in bills for his trips on the state plane, that's on your tab, in the first 2 years. That is a trip every 3 days on the taxpayer-funded airplane for 730 days. Taxpayers have paid for him and his wife to take a trip to a college basketball game in Kansas City and to a Cardinals game in St. Louis. We even paid for him to fly around the state for 2 days to announce a travel moratorium for everyone else in state government. But besides this taxpayer-funded travel, what else does Governor Nixon have to show for his time? In all these press conferences and photo ops, he has not presented a vision for our state. It has become enough of a problem that a well-known St. Louis columnist at a certain daily newspaper in that town recently asked, "How quiet can a governor be?" At a time like this, remaining quiet, remaining silent cannot be the answer. On issue after issue, Governor Nixon has refused to take a stand. Not long ago, he claimed it's not his job to stand up for Missourians. When he was asked whether he was going to fight against job-killing legislation making its way through the Democrat-controlled Congress, his response was, "I'm not the lobbyist for the state." Not the lobbyist for the state? I believe that being governor means being Missouri's strongest lobbyist, our biggest promoter, our most tenacious advocate. It means fighting for new jobs every day, not just when the cameras are on. And time after time, in the past 2 years, we have seen good jobs leaving Missouri to other states, sometimes just across the border, as I see in Kansas City, and other times across our country. And how has Governor Nixon reacted to this devastating loss for Missouri? Well, asked by a St. Louis TV station, he just shrugged it off and said, "You win some and you lose some." Well, with Governor Nixon, we have lost a lot more, a heck of a lot more than we have won. And I say it's time we find a new manager. This lack of leadership is why a national study has ranked Missouri third from the bottom in terms of job loss. It's why 47 other states, we were above only the states of Nevada, which had the catastrophic housing collapse, and New Jersey. It's why 47 other states, including every single one of our neighbors, fared better than Missouri when it came to creating jobs in 2010. It's why Missouri's unemployment rate is now higher than the national average and 3 points higher than neighboring Kansas. It's why our neighbors are pulling out of this recession, but we are still floundering. And this morning's news included a headline that said Missouri lost 10,100 jobs in the month of February. It's why more than 280,000 Missourians can't find work. In 2009 and 2010, we've witnessed over and over Governor Nixon's silence as our nation debated drastic changes to our health care system. While other governors, Republican and Democrat, warned of the massive new unfunded mandates that would wreck our state's budget, Governor Nixon said nothing. During this period, I wrote him letter after letter about the threat to our state budget by the federal health control law. Not once did I have a reply. And as Missourians took to the streets in Tea Party protests and made vivid in every possible way, culminating at the ballot box in August, that we wanted no part of this health care plan, Governor Nixon refused to stand up for us. When his party was pushing for the devastating cap and tax scheme that would raise taxes on everyone who owns a car or has enough money to afford a light bulb, Jay Nixon refused to oppose it. And when his party passed an $800 billion stimulus bill filled with pork projects and wasteful spending, Jay Nixon once again shrugged his shoulders, this time on national television, and said that, well, if there's debt, our kids and grandkids will pay it off. This is not acceptable. Instead, not only did he not oppose the stimulus bill, but he traveled to Illinois to stand up with whoever is governor of Illinois this week. And what was his purpose in going there? To express support for and excitement about a so-called high-speed rail system that has about 1 mile in our state, and the rest of the track is from St. Louis to Chicago in another state. Republican governors across this country are rejecting high-speed rail, so-called high-speed rail, because it is a slow-speed drain, perpetual drain on the taxpayer's pocketbook, and we need leadership that will reverse that kind of catastrophic. Because when Jay Nixon starts talking high-speed rail, he's talking about a high-speed fast track to send more Missouri jobs to other states. But we Republicans have led. We are doing more than critiquing the governor. We are proposing solutions. We have been on the forefront of these issues. We have been in the arena, and we're serving as Missouri's loudest advocates. We fought against the federal health control bill. It is these legislators, as has been said here tonight, who passed the Health Care Freedom Act by a bipartisan majority and sent it to a vote of the people. And last August, you and I went to the ballot box and overwhelmingly passed Proposition C, and we passed it in all 114 counties by a vote of more than 71%, and in doing so, we lit a prairie fire across this country. You can applaud that, applaud yourself, because we Missourians showed the way. And when Washington continued to ignore us, I took a morning here in my hometown to go down, and I love to say this across our state to audiences who don't know about the reason for the name of our courthouse. I went to the Rush H. Limbaugh Senior Federal Courthouse and filed a constitutional challenge to set aside this abomination. Just like Republicans have fought for choice in our health care choices, we too have stood up for you against the job-killing cap and tax and the failed stimulus. And we here in Missouri have promised and are following through on this, not to raise taxes to fill the gaping holes in our budget. We are keeping that promise, and instead we are stretching every dollar and finding ways to do more with less. That's why in the coming months I will be announcing enhanced accountability measures to guard your taxpayer dollars. We should strengthen the role of our independent auditor to identify waste and fraud. We should give the legislature new tools to handle the budget situation, and we should insist on greater oversight over our state's bureaucrats. We Republicans have a long history of reducing wasteful spending. When we took control of the Senate for the first time in 53 years, 10 years ago in January, you may not be surprised. After 53 years of Democratic control, I found a bloated budget, I found ghost employees, I found corruption, bordering on criminality, I found many forms of waste and abuse, and I began reducing it. First, we plateaued that budget, and then we began reducing it. And after you reduce it for about 3 years in a row, you can't reduce it anymore, but it had been increasing the Senate budget 7–8% a year for the previous decade. So we took it flat and then began reducing it. And in my 6 years as Lieutenant Governor, I have spent less than was allocated by my office each year and returned unspent funds to the state treasury, and I will do so again this fiscal year. And the most important thing we can do, we must be focused on and are focused on, is to help our private sector create jobs. To achieve this, we must fight against job-killing federal mandates, to cut taxes to stop the job drain and encourage businesses to move back in Missouri, and look into new partnerships with businesses large and small. When it comes to creating an environment to help businesses grow and flourish, absolutely no idea is off the table. And we are doing all this and more because we are listening to Missourians. Last November, we went to the ballot box and sent a clear message. Missourians sent conservatives to Jefferson City and to Washington. You demanded an end to federal overreach over the proper roles of the state in our system, as designed by the founders. You said you wanted smaller, more efficient government, and you told us to live within our means just like families across Missouri do every single day. Now we need, as I said, an election like the one we had last year. And I would like to close with some remarks from a great hero of mine who I quoted earlier. And from this, I'm drawing on the work of a columnist I admire greatly named Michael Barone, who wrote a piece about our 40th president in the month of February, the centennial of his birth, entitled Ronald Reagan, a True Believer Who Caught Destiny's Eye. You can Google this Michael Barone article, and I commend it to you. It's 7 pages, but I'm just quoting for the last 2 paragraphs. Barone talks about Reagan having been a Democrat, like both of my grandfathers were Harry Truman Democrats here in southeast Missouri. And Reagan was a Democrat well into the middle of his life. Reagan was a believer, Barone said, in American exceptionalism, like his hero, FDR, the hero of his youth. And I would add, like every American president has been a believer in American exceptionalism until the one we have in office now. But while he was still a Democrat, he said this at a commencement speech in 1952. I, in my own mind, have thought of America as a place in the divine scheme of things that was set aside as a promised land. By the way, in that regard, departing from Reagan here for a minute, about the words that are inscribed in the pedestal of the Statue of Liberty, the poem, the great poem by Emma Lazarus, send me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free, the wretched refuse of your teeming shore. Send these, tempest-tossed, to me. I lift my lamp beside the golden door. Emma Lazarus' poem didn't say, send me your wealthy, privileged few, your landed gentry, your ACT 36 scores on the ACT. She didn't say, send me your most brilliant student. The wretched refuse of your teeming shore. That's who we Americans are. We were nothing, most of us, in the old country. We came here seeking liberty. First, religious liberty, and then liberty in all its forms. Liberty to pursue your own means of earning a living, and the chance to own some ground someday that would make something of your family. And this is a very Lincolnian vision. Abraham Lincoln, the vision to get ahead. That's the American way. So that's the vision abandoned by the party of my grandfathers and by the party of Ronald Reagan, who said he didn't leave that party, they left him. But 22 years ago this winter, he was delivering his valedictory speech, his farewell to us as our president, January of 1989. And he said, I've spoken of the shining city on a hill all my political life, but I don't know if I ever quite communicated what I saw when I said it. But in my mind, it was a tall, proud city built on rocks stronger than oceans, windswept, God-blessed, and teeming with people of all kinds, living in harmony and peace. A city with free ports that hummed with commerce and creativity. And if there had to be city walls, the walls had doors. And the doors were open to anyone with the will and the heart to get there. That's how I see it, and that's how I see it still. My fellow Republicans, we can do worse than resorting to the inspiration of our 40th president on this Lincoln Day in Cape County in 2011. I am inspired by him, as I know you are, to continue in these battles that lie ahead of us, and I have no doubt that united we will prevail. Thank you all. Thank you.